What's free time? I don't know what that is.
What?
What?
Free time?
Free time.
What are the words that are coming out like?
Whose time and why do we need to free?
Like,
y'all chose it.
Is it like free thug but free time?
Like, do I have to like? So I just get some time for free? Does that mean I get some clocks?
That's what it is, I think. Free. No, it's like, you know what it is? It's like free Gucci Mane, but it's like time is a guy.
It's like when you have to pay for parking in a national, like in the forest.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you played field hockey?
I did play field hockey.
Nice.
I was not good at field hockey, but I played it.
Then why'd you play field?
Oh, I snuck on the team actually. My parents did not want me to play sports because it would get in the way of my academics. Typical Indian, background. But they let me play tennis because that was kosher. That was very acceptable. in the way.
The rich like white people in like country club sports.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Indians play field hockey. Like, it's a big sport in India. So
Really?
I started playing in the summer with friends who were playing, and I was really excited, and I signed up for it. I told my mom, she signed the letter, and then eventually we told my dad.
So this was in high school?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I got the best grades of my life while I played field hockey.
Yeah, like that's a thing, like.
Because again, it's all about the combination of mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or just not having to study for a little bit, taking a break from that.
Mm-hmm. Or getting some of that anger out.
Oh, yeah.
I played we talk about this in the South, like you grow up like everyone plays football. I played football. Would I let my kids play football? No.
Yeah. I went to a university that didn't have a football team, which was telling.
For like undergrad or?
Undergrad.
I mean, technically my university didn't either, but since ours was part of the UNC system, we all basically just kind of shared
So you
Chapel Hill.
mooched.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're part of the UNC school system, you're just like you're a Tar Heel automatically, even if you're not really a Tar Heel.
High school football was a big deal,
That was
Like-
if my private school did not have a football team.
So you went to private school, they didn't have a football team.
No, they had our fall sport was literally men's soccer.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
So very much of that European mindset.
Yeah.
But it's not like we didn't play football at.
Like, that was so weird because the school you went to, was it a Catholic school?
No, it was a non-denominational like private school.
Yeah. So when we went to,
But we both know the history behind like why private schools were made a thing in the South.
Oh yeah, we talked about that on a different episode.
Yes.
But yeah, like Catholic school is just like, there was this thing in like in the South where it's like it's about family, religion, and football. Those are the most important things.
That generally is kind of the same mindset in where I was at, but again, not very much of a focus. Like in NC, like sports was everything.
Oh yeah, it
Like-
is everything.
We pride ourselves a lot on like every single sport.
Basketball's in city.
Mainly, yeah, basketball's like the main go-ahead. Like
Birthplace of Michael Jordan.
But do you guys have any professional
yes,
teams?
The Charlotte Hornets.
Charlotte Hornets,
Carolina Panthers.
Carolina Panthers.
Gosh, they're
Yeah, again, our professional teams need a lot of work.
Yeah.
Our collegiate teams, top notch.
Well, it's like Connecticut. Our professional sports are non-existent once the Whalers were gone.
Well, there's the
But the
WNBA
Huskies.
team.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah,
Mm.
but that meant to block me out because I messed that up. But we got the Huskies, right? So college sports is there.
UConn.
Yeah. But did you go to like for high school? Was it a public school?
I went to public schools. We were the Watertown Indians, so I was sometimes asked like, "Oh,
You
are
can
you the
really-
mascot?"
Ooh,
You know. But yeah, it was a public school in a small town, 20,000 people. Football was the center of the attention. Sports. It was like you were cool. It was typical, what you would see in your Friday Night Lights.
Yeah, that was the story of my school too. It was, just like it was so. I always found it weird how like every like school administrator and teacher like valued football over like education.
Yeah. And we had a private school in town, and it was them versus us.
Yeah.
And you would, like, when you went into a certain after-school hangout, we hung out at the gas station after school. They hung out at the, like,
The
Country
caviar.
club.
the health food, prep food place,
The
like the
caviar.
fancy restaurant, the cafe,
Mhm.
Oh, I thought it would be like
the country club.
The caviar. The caviar.
that was
store.
literally one of the spots at my private school was like because our private school was right next to a country club, and that's where a lot of our facilities was located at. But yeah, that used to be a thing because a lot of the families already had memberships, and you know from time to time I'll go in there with them because like they just shine in, just say I'm such such like son and or daughter, and they'll be like go on in, not question anything. But
I don't even know if my town has a country club. I'm sure it does, but that shows my status in town.
yeah,
Mhm.
but like that a gas station was y'all's like hangout spot in high school.
Yeah, yeah.
Ours was a lot of like restaurants,
Oh.
Mhm.
more so cookout.
For us, it was like honestly, and you're gonna laugh at me for this, but yeah, you're gonna roast me for this, and then we'll get into the show. But it was the sewer.
Whoa, wait, you went into a sewer?
Yeah.
Like you would open the sewer thing and climb down into a sewer.
Yeah.
Wow.
Louisiana.
Dirty South.
Dirty, dirty.
They're like the deep dirty south.
Yeah.
Like that's a oh my god, like you Louisiana swamp donkeys are crazy.
I know, it's crazy, man. You know, like gators and stuff. Anyway, let's start that show.
Welcome back.
To the Southern Fried Humanitarian Podcast, the only podcast where your two hosts are humanitarian workers from the South discussing regionality, cultural differences, living far away from home. I'm Sam, joined by my faithful co-host Prey.
Welcome everybody.
Yep, and to get very special guest. A person who needs no introduction, but we're gonna do it anyway. Please welcome to the stage the Banana Pudding.
Thank you.
Well, the Banana Pudding. You know, welcome to the show, the Southern Fried Humanitarian. So, yeah, we're here today discussing about nonprofits because obviously we work in the nonprofit sector and just sort of like, and I'm really happy we got you to come on the show with the kind of the higher up. So we're interested to see today we're really interested to see how like that administrative processes really work.
Yeah, and of course we would love to share what your title is, but because of our show's anonymity, we apologize we are not allowed to disclose that, but we can say that the Banana Pudding is part of the administrative side of the humanitarian. And I think one of my first questions would be for you, Banana Pudding, was why did you select, a career in humanitarian work or in this field of like nonprofit, like humanitarian work?
You know, I wonder that a lot sometimes when I look back on my career when I was forced to think about a certain direction that would be standard within my cultural norms, right? To be a doctor, to be an engineer, and those kinds of things. But I think it started because my family are immigrants, and I grew up first generation, and grew up going back to my parents' country of origin, and just being exposed to both in the U.S. and abroad, various cultures, various situations, various access to opportunities, and knowing my parents' own story about why they came, I think I always just felt I should give back, no matter where my status is, no matter what I'm doing, I should be giving back, and so it just was a natural calling. In high school, I was building schools in our honor society, and I think nonprofits just spoke to my values, and I wanted my values to align with the work I was going to do.
Yeah, I kind of resonate with that because like my parents again were immigrants, and technically if you were born here from immigrant parents, you're technically second generation.
I argue with that, man. I still think I'm first generation.
See, now I was on your side for a long time until like my sister actually broke it down like methodically through her own research.
Is she quoted in a book? Is she published?
Yes.
Oh
That's,
man, no.
she is literally getting a doctorate in like equity education.
That's fair. I guess it's how you look at generations, right? My parents are the first of they are the first generation to be here
Yeah.
to start up things, but then we are the first generation to be born and build off of
Yeah.
where they came from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always kind of think about like, you probably have some relatives who were born overseas, came over here, but grew up essentially in America. You know,
Yeah, I mean, I just found out, I should have known, but it just clicked to me the other day. I have family visiting from abroad, their first time leaving their area, their country, and I was thinking about my mom and my dad have lived most of their life in the U.S. now at this point, which is just, it took me aback because I still see them so much deeply rooted in where they came from.
yeah, that's how I view my parents too, because it's just they spend majority of their lives here than back in their home country, and I think where I was going with it, because like my parents were very much when they first came into the area, they were a part of the huge immigrant community. It was at the time very small, tight knit, and kind of expanded out. So a lot of times they would have convenience stores all throughout the city, and they would also be part of, like helping out refugees, like Bhutanese refugees, helping them like get like jobs. And my dad always had a good heart when it came to like understanding that they would require some assistance in trying to get at least something.
Yeah.
So sometimes we would just go and drop off a huge bag of rice so they can eat.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. So bags of rice. So you dropped off bags of rice?
Yeah, so that's how I got into the foray of like like helping out immigrants and humanitarian immigrants. It was also my uncle who, again, my family has a lot of PhDs in it, and it's
I
just
hear
like
ya.
it's always kind of like, oh, okay, now no matter what I get, I still have uncles that are doctors, siblings that are doctors. Again, it's not like the stereotypical realm of like forced career paths that most most people from our like ethnic side of the world will probably understand. My parents were actually more progressive than anything else. They kind of like just made sure that as long as we followed our dreams and do the right thing, that's all they really cared about.
Yeah.
Because I mean, our family beforehand they were more like educators or administrators, hands of kings.
Yeah. My parents grew up in they were of a certain group within their country, and but grew up very differently. One well off, one not well off. 13 people to a house, no food. My father and his older brothers were the breadwinners, and so they came here for that better life. They weren't necessarily refugees being forced to flee, but in some ways, there is when your opportunity, what is your opportunity? But they were very progressive as well, and not necessarily. I mean, I got the you make a good doctor, and I'd be like, I know, but not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But what I think shows their openness to explore what you wanted to be is when my sister was 5 and I was still in my mom's womb. They said if we want our daughters to marry someone from where we came from, we go back now. Otherwise, we embrace where we are, and we're open in every sense of it, from what they choose to do, who they choose to be with, how they choose to live. So
That's an interesting pivot. That's a very interesting pivotal moment. Like it kind of, I would be curious, and then we'll get back to the standard interview questions. But I'd be curious to know what brought about that pivotal moment. It was just the fact that they'd figured out oh it's a girl, or was it
I think it was a couple of different things. I think at that point my sister was almost starting regular school, so they had to make a choice of investing. And then my parents were originally arranged for marriage, and then there was rumors that my dad, who was doing his grad school in Iowa, had a second family here. To which this day we're like, hey Dad, when are we gonna meet our half siblings, stepmom, and our all your side hustles. And my mother's paternal grandmother my mother's dad and uncle called off the wedding. And my mom was in a different place doing her medical school and said, no, I'm marrying this man. And so she was essentially disowned for a while. And back in the 70s, that's a big deal, especially where they're from. And so I think he did not want that to be a situation that they endured or that we endured. And so also for me to find out it was my dad who brought that up, I was like, oh, you know, pretty progressive for a man at that point in the 80s. And
But it kind of like that kind of story kind of reminded me of like how, because it was the same situation with like my uncle. He was the one that kind of brought us all over. Because
my dad.
my paternal grandfather actually passed away when my father was young, and he was therefore had to step up and kind of like help his the rest of his family. But his older brother, my uncle, actually got one of the first immigrant scholarships to come to the U.S. and get his degree here. That's where he met my aunt, who was actually from Connecticut, and moved down to NC.
Downgraded.
No, they upgraded. They really upgraded.
This interview is over.
They didn't really upgrade, but he was able to bring all of them over after getting them through and his citizenship through. He literally like left my aunt for another woman and like moved down to Florida. So then he downgraded.
So you don't tell this story in your work as a way to motivate others, right?
Yeah, that feels it feels like we're blurring the lines of like,
I just
it feels kind of sexist too. If we were like,
yeah, but here's
what
the thing:
to
we
do.
kind of like we didn't stick with him. We kind of like forgot him and actually kept the aunt.
Mhm.
And to this day, she is like a grandma to me.
Yeah,
That's great.
he's the
Yeah.
deadbeat cousin.
Yeah.
Exactly. To this day, I've only met him once in my life, and that's it.
Maybe he needs to be on this podcast one day.
Maybe he
No.
does.
Nah, I ain't gonna do that.
He'll listen to the podcast and be like, I need to get on this podcast.
Yeah, but what are we gonna do with someone who has like a degree in or a PhD in animal husbandry?
I mean that.
I know there's a lot. I could talk to him about like, cow stomachs.
Well, and also cattle is often a source of contention in a lot of countries where there is conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you guys actually have a lot of like deep intellectual thoughts about this.
Well,
When I heard he had a degree in animal husbandry, I was like, that just literally like, you have a degree in animal.
Well, not necessarily, but also like there are certain cultures in like South Asia, correct me if I'm wrong, that like prescribe like a divinity to cows. Is
Yep.
that right?
There
Yep.
are. Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a lot to talk about.
But he doesn't just focus on bovines.
Well, yeah, we could talk about chickens and the tax breaks that are associated in the American agricultural system with, animals.
I mean,
pigs.
I'd much rather get my other uncle that actually has a PhD in like peace and conflict studies that actually works for the Peace and Conflict Institute in California.
Oh no, I would much rather him too.
That's
But
more
I'm just
relevant.
saying,
Yep.
what are
But
we?
is it as interesting?
What
Yeah,
are we?
that was
gonna,
actually my foray into how I got into humanitarian work and resettlement was through him.
But what are we gonna? But like you asked, what are we gonna talk about with a guy with a PhD in animal husbandry? We just gave you a bunch of answers.
I got more if you need it.
Yeah, we can. Put the-
Sorry.
I'm just saying, I don't like the man because the way he did my aunt dirty.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's
Got it.
fair. That's fair.
But
We just simply answered the question.
now, segueing back. Oh, what? I'm a little salty now. Jeez. But segueing back, what were your pathways to get into this current position? Like, how did you stumble upon both academically and professionally?
Long story short, which one? I mean, I could.
I'll say it's a long story
Yeah, and then yeah. So I mean,
or
I
medium
think
story.
I mean, college was what it was. I not to say a waste because it was a lot of money, but it was, as far as academically went, I think you're too young to decide what you want to study when you're 18 and to make good use of it. But a moment in college was when I studied abroad, and I did the International Honors Program, which now sits with SIT, that's in Vermont. Super woo-woo, hippie, yuppie, but really cool program that you guys should look into and see if there's people you want to explore there to talk to. But and they took me, and it was about about indigenous perspectives. So we went from the southeast or southwest in Dene or Navajo country to the northeast in India, looking at the Meghalaya, the Mizoram and the Khasi people, to New Zealand with the Maori people, and then to Mexico where we were in Chiapas working with an indigenous group there, and then the Zapatista. So like Subcommando Marco, look them up, it's pretty fascinating stuff. And in that we were kind of looking at how their perspective of land, of knowledge, of governance shaped the way they lived, but then was also taken away because of colonization and democracy or capitalism, whichever choice you want to pick for that. And in that moment, I was just fascinated by the idea of like, knowledge is not just school, right? It's not just your rote material, and the perspective that you get from reading the classics in AP English is not, you know, what's going to set you up to really connect to the world you're in. And so for me, that, and especially looking at how with the Maori, they they forced them to go to standard school, and they said, no, you cannot go to this knowledge, like your type of school, you must learn what we're saying, and they took them away from their own way of learning and connecting with the land. And so I took that and decided to do a teaching fellowship, and I became a teacher for 2 years in a city, and I taught special ed. And it was a culmination of that and wanting to do something international, and also wanting to make a difference, that I went back and got my degree in international educational development, a master's in that. And through a graduate assistantship I had with the professor who worked at a very well-known humanitarian organization, I landed my first job in Liberia. And from there, I caught what they call the humanitarian bug. And I was in Liberia.
Do they call it that?
I've never heard this.
Yeah, there's a humanitarian, it's the bug. It's you get addicted to, I don't know if it's the adrenaline, to the, you know, the whatever it is, but I went 2 years in Liberia, I was in South Sudan and Congo, I spent 2 years in Iraq, a year in Afghanistan, and then I did about a year what they call humanitarian response with an organization. And so I would fly out within 3 days notice to places like, I was in Syria, when the typhoon hit in Haiyan, in Philippines, Typhoon Haiyan, I went there, and it became a lifestyle. So I never thought, sitting in my international relations course freshman year, that I would be, you know, running around the world, working side by side with people, but it kind of, I think, was a natural evolution of where I came from.
I think like it kind of reminded me of like, so you kind of got into the human factor of, you know, the nonprofit humanitarian sector. You know, that's kind of like a huge topic when it comes to like, you know, when you talk about public administration and a lot of key organizational structures, is that like a lot of the work you're doing, you also got to focus on the human side. You know, not, since you're in the administrative field, you also have to look at like not only just the people you serve, but also your employees, and like the human factor of, you know, building the relationships, getting that connection. And I feel like no wonder you caught like the humanitarian bug, because if you got sent to all those places, I would have caught it too. I'm like, dang, I'm getting sent everywhere.
Well, you meet some of the most passionate people about about their own culture and about their own country, and you want to work side by side, building the systems or helping them build the systems, because they know better than you, right? And I think that's the same in my job here. I am not an expert in any one of the technical fields that I work in, but my job is to stand by the people who are and say, how can I help make this job easier? How can I, you know, make things flow better so you can focus in on what's important for that person you're working with who needs help.
That's actually a great way to put it in. Going off that, like, what would like your typical workday actually encompass?
Oh goodness. Is there a typical?
It doesn't have to be typical. Just like generally, you can be like,
Tell us about your day to day.
Tell me about
or
my
like
day-to-day.
on this day, like usually like hits fan.
Yeah, I mean, there is always a moment in the day where hits the fan, and that is usually escalated to me. So I think my day to day, what I usually, it's a lot of one-on-ones with staff I work with, talking about what they do and growing their professional development. It is a lot of, hey, I'm having difficulty with this client, can you work with them? So oftentimes when I am meeting the clients we work with, it's because things have not gone well. But then, I mean, when I meet that client several months or years later in the office, I'm like, I remember you. I know where you came from. We're doing better, right? And then it's meetings with donors, meetings with senior staff. It's trying to coordinate among all the different teams that are in the office I work with to make sure they're communicating and making sure that people just have the tools that they need to do the work. And it's also fighting our headquarters and others to make sure that the workload isn't too top down, which, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah. It kind of also got me thinking about like, a lot of the stuff, especially in anything that relates to like public works that serves people even in nonprofit realms, there's always like politics involved. Not only that, but like there's different avenues because like there's things in the nonprofit sector that we are able to do that governmental organizations or agencies are not even capable of doing. There's set procedures. They just can't up and do it like we can. In which case, kind of like, it kind of goes back to like that public nonprofit relationship. Can you speak on like how you've seen that? What kind of politics that you had to type of play with, or just?
Yeah, and I have worked for the government before, so I've seen it from that side, and there are bureaucracies, but there are bureaucracies in a nonprofit as well. There is always an agenda, and sometimes the word agenda gets a negative connotation to it, but there's always a goal. What are we trying to do? And that's always, I think from a government perspective, comes from the constituents that it serves, which is not going to be monolith, right? And so it's trying to help everyone to get to a goal, which in our world is humanitarian. And you would think is not political, but it has become very political. But it's tied to money, and when things are tied to money, there's always going to be certain contentions with it. So I'm trying to think of, the kinds of things I see are the requirements that are asked of nonprofits to showcase the work that they've done, and sometimes it's more performative than it actually is getting to the point of what the work is. So not really like give us the numbers. Well, is that what's important, or is it the stories? It's also like we want to spend this money on this, and it's bouncing back and saying like, but is that the best place to put the money? Is that what it is? And so it's always a conversation, but sometimes things do come to you rather than a discussion. And in those moments, sometimes you have to take it, sometimes you can push back. And it's finding that that balance. And my current supervisor is very good at finding that balance of knowing where to push back, where to advocate, and where to be like, okay, we'll do it, but maneuver it the way you need to make it happen in a good way.
Yeah, but do you think that like when it comes to like any sort of organization, like it is my experience that be it a club or government or just a nonprofit, that like internal politics are just kind of the norm?
Oh, 100%. It goes back to what Prey was saying. We're humans.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot take the human side out of this work. We work for humans, but we are also humans, and it is messy. And sometimes it's good messy, sometimes it's bad messy. But yeah, I don't think I've worked anywhere where there wasn't some inkling of politics. But the important part is that to better what you're doing, or is it because people are looking for power, or is it because the people don't really understand the problem? So it's sometimes the politics are for a good cause, hopefully.
Yeah, and then like it kind of comes to like a greater point of like, well, you know, if you just kind of play this little politics game, you'll be able to get more money out of it, and you'll be able to help more people with it.
Oh, there's definitely that.
But how much, like, how far removed? I would be curious to see like how far removed you'd have to be to like, when does the juice not worth the squeeze in that context?
I mean, I think it's a great question. I think there has been moments where we have said, or I've been in a position where we've said no because it just doesn't align with the values. But then it's also, if you are, and it's the perpetual problem of nonprofits, and you know, you are always resource poor, and you're helping people who are resource poor, and it is this constant struggle. And we don't, you know, what we lack is this idea of a business model. We are a business. It doesn't sound human to say that. It's not very humanitarian to say, but we are a business. We gain assets, we pay people, we have goals and outcomes, we collect revenue. And I think if you're constantly resource poor, it's hard to say no. And I do think that's when a nonprofit's vision, their values, even though sometimes it could feel like it's a performative thing to have those, that's when we do a strategy, making those things really reflective of who we are is important, because that's when you can say this doesn't align, we have to say no, even though saying no means we're going to struggle.
Yeah, that actually kind of reminded me of like this concept that we were learning in class about, you know, I hate to say this because like I dislike this man with a burning passion, but Woodrow Wilson was actually one of the first, like, you know, presidents that actually had a PhD, and he viewed administration in the government as like it has a necessary function. And you know, taking the inspiration, because during his time it was all about the Industrial Revolution,
Yeah.
the process of like running the government as a business, doing everything in the most effective and efficient manner as possible, because there is a work that needs to be done, but the government has to act like, how can we best do that with, how do you like get the most bang for our buck?
Yeah.
Again, dislike Woodrow Wilson a lot of racist history with him, but I think another question I got is more on like the bureaucracies and the organizational structures of like, you know, both nonprofits and governmental agencies, since you have experience in both.
Yeah.
Like, what is the tendencies of like bureaucracies within organizations?
How are you defining bureaucracy? Let's push that a little bit.
Usually when we think about bureaucracies, you're thinking like pushing things up to the food chain,
Yeah.
getting clearance or approval for things.
Yeah.
I think most of the time people just think of like, you go submit an application to the government, you gotta wait 30 days, you didn't get a notice, you gotta go to the, like... I mean,
it's not totally off. I remember when I had a few months in my position, and we had to put together information for someone high up, and it was very important so that they could be ready to present at a meeting. And this is with my government position. And the way the information had to be presented was in a folder with certain color paper clips on each side, and you couldn't get the paper clip colors wrong, and it had to be positioned correctly. And I remember on a Friday, it was a Friday at 6, and if you've ever worked in the government, everybody goes home at 5. It's amazing. I don't know how they do it. They run things so well and efficiently, they get to go home at 5. But I was there because I had never had to do like that administrative side of work before. My positions were always just, and I was and I had the paper clip colors wrong, and we had to redo it, and I was just like, why? Like, what is this? This has nothing to do with the content that is there. But, you know, so that's just an example of what slowed it down and the requirements were to get information. And a lot of times in the humanitarian world, I've worked with I have a lot of friends who work in the government side of humanitarian work with various governments. They're wonderful, they're well-intentioned. I have a lot of friends who work with the UN, well-intentioned, but when you work in such a big bureaucracy like that, it does slow things down. To get money approved so that a implementing partner like a nonprofit can do it can take 6 months.
Yeah, because I'm always thinking like, because it's not decentralized, it's always centralized. It always has to go to another department.
Yeah.
Nothing's like really connected. So you're gonna have to pass the buck to someone else.
Well, even when I was in the field in any of those countries, there was a humanitarian crisis happening in that country. We would have to get approval from some headquarters far away removed, to do certain things. And so how, if you're supposed to be quick on your feet, right, to do life-saving activities, what does that mean if you have to get approvals, or what does it mean that you have to do certain signatures on paper? And I know compliance and accountability is really important, even in a humanitarian crisis, but that's where things slow down. In nonprofits, it's not different. Again, everyone is well-intentioned, but I think there's often a disconnect from the people who are, even us, right? There's sometimes a disconnect from what you are doing day to day and what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And I think closing that gap is a little easier than how it gets when you go higher and higher up.
Yeah, and I would be, and again, this is straying away from this a little bit, but just something to think, just something to chew on, but don't feel obligated to answer it. But I would be interested to see this vast. We are the age in which technology is right now in terms of information technology, tracking and stuff. I would be an advent in nanotechnology. I'd be really interested to see how that's going to play out with accountability in the governmental sector, and as well as the nonprofit sector over the next 20 years. I feel like that's going to be something really fun to watch, or not fun, but that's going to be something that is going to be really important, I think.
Yeah, and I see the validity in doing that. I also, I caution with it. I think during COVID, we were making sure people were, time on task, right? Making sure people are actually working, but you judge that by the outputs and what the outcomes are, not necessarily they were not at the computer all 8 hours that they were supposed to be, or 7.5 hours, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if tech is the way to track it and how you would, except for, check in and see if you're sitting at your desk right now.
Oh, well, it's, I think, the thing that's really scary about that is that, who is the people who get to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Because as much as we're sitting here, we don't really get to, and we can say, okay, well, that's a bad idea. Or, well, that's a bad idea, let's not go forward with it. We're not going to be the decision makers in that respect. Well, I think it is highly unlikely that we will be.
I think for the work we do, right, what is important is are the families we work with doing okay?
Yeah.
And that is, we have such a clear marker of what it is. It's not this intangible is your data spreadsheet updated, or whatever other people do. I don't know what non-humanitarians do, but I think there will always be back to that human side of it, right? We have to keep that human aspect, because we work with humans, and tech can't completely control the quality of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of reminded me a little bit of because we were talking about this kind of had to deal with hiring in a sense, but it kind of reminded me of a conversation we had earlier about what we kind of balance out the need for a hire. It has to outweigh the benefit, because the benefit always has to be for the client.
Yeah.
All the work that is being provided and the work that it would take for people to be trained, it has to basically be an avenue to where it's going to always benefit the client. If that individual is not able to do the tasks and is going to chew up more time off the team, and that negatively affects the team's ability to actually work with that
Exactly.
client, then it defeats our purpose in that. And it kind of got me thinking about like the meritocracy of like nonprofits. But I don't know if there's like any like if you've ever experienced any sort of nepotism or like basically the boys club mentality of, oh, we used to play golf together, so I'm gonna give you the promotion instead.
Yeah, the country club aspect.
Basically.
Yeah.
I mean, the humanitarian world is a small world, right? So and I came from the international side, and I mean, I can't really speak to that, but I will say it's a small world, and when you, at least on that side, when you've been out in the trenches with people, you form bonds, and I think I see it on this side too, with the team, and I have with the team I work very closely with, and it's not so much as nepotism, it's trust, right? Would you trust this person because this is critical work, and would you trust them, and do they have that like loyalty, and are they good, decent people? Because there are not good, decent people out there who get into the humanitarian world.
Yeah. Not to mention like qualifications, like are you able to even do this like that?
Yeah.
Because again, we all want to help people, but like the specific ways that we're doing it, you at least got to have some sort of qualification to.
Or do you believe in it?
Yeah.
Or will you like doing it?
Or like, yeah, like for me, like a guiding principle for my work is always for this job specifically is like, how do you like what action that I take next is going to do the most good for my client?
Yeah, and I think what action am I going to take next is going to do good for the staff, and I definitely make mistakes in that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think in this last year where we have been under extreme pressure, it has fallen wayward because I have been able to take care of myself fully, right?
Yeah.
And so, but yeah.
I think another good question, like that it will be unique to get your perspective on is, being a woman and a person of color in a leadership position in a male-dominated field that, typically has always been white-dominated.
Yeah.
Yeah, with people who look like me.
So
I got what he meant. Thank you.
So like, what were your experience and viewpoints on that? And
I have a couple of perspectives on that. I think when I started doing this work, especially abroad, what is it called? Where you don't think you're capable of doing something, but
Imposter syndrome?
yeah, and I still have that, right? And I think that's normal for women and women of color as they start to go up into different leadership roles. But in the field, like questioning, well, who am I to come into this country to do this work and say, this is how you do this in your country? And I was often supervising men and women who were much older than me. I started my, going abroad when I was 25, and also had years of like knowledge and work history. And I think it's figuring out how you work side by side with someone and not directing someone. And sometimes you're going to direct people, but gaining their trust makes you more confident in your ability to lead. Do I want to break glass ceilings? I mean, in the nonprofit world, it's limited, but I don't think so. I don't know if my ambition is to go higher and higher, because that takes me further and further away from the work. And when I moved back to this country, I got a job where I did not work with people, and I couldn't do it. And I did not work in a program that gave back to the community I was living in, and that was really hard for me too. But as far as being a woman and a woman of color I think it's why I took the job, because I saw the diversity in this office that we work in. I also knew it was a value of the leader of the office to make sure that we had diverse perspectives in leadership, and that it was something that would be voiced beyond this office to headquarters. So, I mean, the first time I went to a leadership meeting, it was very apparent of, being outnumbered, I guess, for being a woman of color in the role.
Any advice you would give to like any young professionals looking to get into like a leadership position in administrative sides of nonprofits or government agencies?
Yeah, I think it's working on your. I mean, I think the hard skills are important, right? Writing, speaking, good analysis and quality, but I really think it's empathy. Like, where do you fall on the empathy side? How are you able to form relationships with people? How are you able to listen to people and then take that into consideration in the decisions you make? And that oftentimes people don't think that's a skill you can grow or a muscle you can grow, but I think it is. I think it's something that's often missing from leaders, and even in the humanitarian space. So I think for me that's a really big thing. And then step up when people ask, would you volunteer to do this? Or not volunteer, but there's this opportunity to do this. Do you want to? Step up, or if you see something that could be improved, put it out there. It might not be taken right away, but shoot your shot.
Yeah. Any specific advice for any women of color that are also looking towards this field?
Yeah, I mean, don't not go for it because of the fact that you're a woman. Don't let that hold you back. And I also think use it, right? Speak to your lived experience. Speak to how that could transform the way the leadership culture and the administration or administrative aspects of the work happen. I amplify it.
But any other questions before we head to halftime?
No, I'm good.
All right, we'll be right back. Hey y'all, this is Prey. Just want to thank y'all for listening to the pod. I know we talk a lot about our work as humanitarians and the great services we're able to provide to our clients, but this is a sector that still could use a lot of help. So please, if you're able to donate to your local resettlement agency or national nonprofit that provides critical services to immigrant or vulnerable communities, please do so. Y'all stay blessed. Now back to the show.
So if you are walking through certain areas, I was walking in that area the other day, and I saw a Black Lives Matter sign next to a sign that says Neighborhood Patrol by Neighborhood Watch. I'm like, come on guys, come on.
Or just a whole neighborhood that just got gentrified and they just have Black Lives Matter signs. You didn't say that when you're kicking the families out.
Yeah, but we were talking about this in we had talked about this in a previous episode, my family, why, and this will be a future episode of why New Orleans is better than Atlanta, but because one city's getting gentrified, one's not. I'm telling you that right now.
There's a reason why no one wants to gentrify New Orleans.
I know. That's what makes it better. That's not the whole.
But again, Atlanta is literally one of the key places, one of the best Black excellence cities in the U.S.
And New Orleans isn't?
Not compared to Atlanta.
Ever heard of jazz?
Well, it's how you define excellence, I guess.
I know.
In terms of wealth,
wealth,
capital
prosperity, and just kind of basic communal activity. Again, they also have several HBCUs down in Atlanta.
And they have them in New Orleans too, man.
Not the same as
Yes, they do.
Again, none of them can be NCANT.
Which
Go
is,
Aggies.
fun fact, not in Atlanta.
It's
in North Carolina.
Yeah. It's one of the oldest HBCUs in the country, and yeah.
Oh no, yeah, no, not knocking it at all. But that's a future episode.
Yeah.
But we're gonna talk about a topic for the second half of the show. We talked about this with we've danced around a little bit, especially with social media and stuff that's been happening. We're gonna talk about slacktivism.
Yeah. And there is, because again there are be times especially during the pandemic, a lot of the protests around Black Lives Matter movement, surrounding George Floyd and all that. I feel the internet was the perfect thing because in a pandemic, even when some people were not physically able to go out and join in the protests, they were still able to engage and be active. But like we're gonna discuss, there's always gonna be some downsides when it comes to that.
Oh yeah, you can like the war in Ukraine right now. It's like it shows you exactly what you need to do. Like remember in March when everyone had like Ukraine flags.
I mean, there's Ukrainian flags over the highway passes
Mhm.
on 66.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't seen. I guess that makes sense, but like it doesn't do anything really.
I just am curious who put it up there. It's an interesting place to
I'm
put
also
it.
just kind of like, I think it was huge for the first week, and then like again, this has been something that's been going on since like February,
Mhm.
still going on, and like it's not reaching the same level of attention. It was kind of like more of a hot topic issue.
Mhm.
And I feel like the way the world is now, especially with the internet, like there's always gonna be some new coming out every single time, especially like when we had to deal with like the Orange Man beforehand. Always some coming out.
Yeah, and like it just gets caught up in this like news cycle, and we kind of like, and again like we talked about in the first show, like putting like the human in humanitarian.
Yeah.
So like we still are dealing like there's still a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan.
And there's the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. It's like that's what I was trying to go with. Is like we had to deal with that even when like it was no longer in the news, where
Mhm.
if it only was brought up if like the news medias actually wanted to be brought up. But after the first initial months, they kind of like lost a narrative. Not a lot of people were paying attention anymore. But in the beginning, when like it was actually happening, we had a lot of people reach out just to like offer their help and support.
Or
Once it stopped becoming in this news cycle,
or just people like looking for like clarity on the situation too.
or just that little slacktivism.
I mean, to give people benefit of the doubt, like what is continuous engagement for causes supposed to look like when there's so many causes and there's a limit to what you as an individual can do besides give money, hang a flag. I mean, in outwardly, right? A lot of the work when we talk about Black Lives Matter and other issues like that is inward. It's in the conversations you're having. It's in the things that aren't necessarily performative and posted. I would hope, right? And I think that's where I get lost with a lot of the causes is with this word you use that I had to Google, slacktivism. I said it right.
Mhm.
There you go. I do see that, and I get that, but then how do you gauge it is that and not someone trying to show that this is the way I do it? Like, how do you know it doesn't go beyond there? The flag, or the email, or the money?
I would say that a couple things. Like one, it would show the way we like show support. The way that we show support for any sort of cause is in a democracy. We like will elect lawmakers who have that cause, who share our values in that. So I think that like the lack of like sort of political participation in that,
That's fair.
and that is one way where you could say this is like just putting the flag up is a little ineffective.
Yeah, and I think also just like the continuousness of like pressing that issue. Like, of course you can say Black Lives Matter back in 2020. Are you still saying it today?
Yeah.
Do you still bring it up? Do you still try to like better yourself and in discussions of racial like hierarchy and like racism in America? That's where I see it. Especially with donations, I feel like even that is more of a kind of like a personal insight on this. I think if you're going to donate money, and if you're doing for the greater good, not for any sort of recognition or basically getting a write-off on your taxes. If you do it anonymously, and do it recurrently as an anonymous donor, I think that really shows more of like the actual intent of an activist.
And commitment
Yeah.
to it.
That you're not looking for like the actual attention, and this ain't like something to do so you can beef up your taxes.
It's true.
But this is something that's kind of been happening for years.
Yeah.
Like that was I'll stop doing this. But they talked about it in the Bible. That's how old this issue is.
Yeah. But I think just more of like, I don't know. Again, we'll still take people's money if you want recognition and tax write-off. It's still good that you're actually supporting a cause, but I think the main thing we don't really want like to get like main takeaway is more of that it was an actual cause to you, that it actually meant something, and that you were actually doing something out of the goodness of your heart, not trying to capitalize on a situation.
And also, I think we need to do a better job of holding our lawmakers accountable. These kind of things, because if your base is if a majority of your base is saying, Black Lives Matter, then you should probably listen to your base and vote accordingly. You shouldn't vote for, it's like, okay, I'm a representative. My constituency is like, Black Lives Matter. I'm like, yes, they do. I agree with you. And now let me vote to pass these zoning laws. Like that kind of thing.
Or let me reject voting for a extension for voting rights,
Mm-hmm.
or
budgets or non-budgets.
Let me
Or
slash social programs.
Like slashing like any sort of social service, and kind of demonizing the people that use it. Like, there's a reason why we have the safety net.
Mm-hmm.
Because you always need a safety net, otherwise you like, again, I see basically everything like as like the whole old saying of like, a team is only as good as its weakest link. So, a team, an organization, a country, they're only as good as their weakest link, and it's kind of like the responsibility of the whole to actually improve each other.
I mean, that's a very idealistic way of looking at how we operate.
I mean, that's like
as
everything.
as a country as a whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just see it as like we all live in a society. We have a moral obligation to work together to build up the society and build up ourselves. Because
Yeah, but unfortunately, that's not really what our society has kind of become. It's become this like adversarial thing.
yeah, again, that's like the way I'm thinking is more big brain thinking.
Are you thinking big brain?
Big brain.
Are you saying he's not thinking big brain?
Are you saying that I'm using small brain?
Yeah.
Dang. Wow. Well, what do I got to say about implementing good social programs?
Let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do apologize for that. It was not.
All right. That was fun.
I mean, it was fun, but it's not like.
It's not serious. We're mixing the serious and the humor.
Yes.
That's what we do here.
But let's go back on topic.
Yeah. What were we talking about?
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I do think
Slacktivism.
slacktivism. Yeah, we're slacking here. But yeah, no, like I don't know. I guess it's kind of like, I don't know. I had this experience of like, like at the onset of the Ukraine crisis and in this country, especially like February, when people were like, because like I talk about like what I did, and people would be like, oh, well, because I'm in DC. And people will be like, oh, like, you guys, how do you feel about Ukraine? I'm like, Ukraine? No, Afghanistan. That's still happening, and that's what I do and my day-to-day looks like that. Not to discount that, but, I think there's something to be said of, like, if it's almost like a more palatable crisis to, like, people in this country, because if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't peel my eyes away from the hurricane aftermath. I think we're attracted to what's put in front of us, for better or for worse. But then it's the intrinsic motivation of how do we continue to care.
I mean, it's kind of like when you see a wreck on the highway and you're passing by. You know for a fact, like you feel bad for that person, but you just, for some reason, you can't not look away of what just happened.
Yeah. There's also that old like newsroom saying, "If it bleeds, it leads."
I mean,
Yeah. But I think it's just like, I don't know. It's very much I think we always try to give people the benefit of the doubt when it comes to like their causes and good causes. But you always can't take that for face value.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. But at face value. But I think unless you are able to probe more with them, you have to take it at face value, right?
Yeah.
You have to give the benefit of the doubt. It's not, at least in our work, our job to say, but are you really committed? Because that's our job, to be really committed. It's not necessarily theirs in the humanitarian. I mean, it is in their day-to-day life. Maybe they want to, but
Yeah, I feel like you probably have like a better perspective on both, like the home front of resettlement and the overseas part of the resettlement process. Like, what would be like the biggest takeaway from each one?
Takeaway in terms of what?
Like takeaway of like the main differences you see in those roles, or in like those sides of like being in overseas, helping them out, and responding to like crises.
Yeah.
Crises.
I get to go home when I'm here, to like my own home. I think that's a difference. For me personally, it feels more poignant and better fit to support people in the country I live in and the systems that I honestly, from my own privilege point, have to admit weren't very well versed in, like the welfare system and the ins and outs of certain parts of our medical system and our educational system, but to at least help people navigate a system that I can better support than in a place I can't. But yeah, I think that's the biggest difference as far as a personal experience. There, it almost feels like things are forgotten, right? I don't think when you're in, and I was in these countries when there weren't big campaigns to support, but I think there's a disconnect on what people actually think, what's going on. I don't know what I'm saying, actually. You can scratch that.
It's alright. Actually, one thing we can do is like, which states in the South have you gone to?
Okay. I have been to almost all 50 states. So I have been to, well, I said this before, but I considered anything below Trenton to be the South, growing up in Connecticut. So I have been, I see noses flare, nostrils flaring, but it is the truth when you are a Connecticuter and you went to school in Boston and lived in New York and...
I'm sorry, what do you guys call yourselves in the state?
Canetto. What? Canetto. Oh my god.
I don't know the official... I said Cutter.
Canetto.
Connecticut.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know why that seems so out of place, but I think like
it
a
might
lot
not
of...
be the right one.
I feel like,
Connecticution.
anytime you say that to like a southerner, that anything below Trenton's the South, you can't be mixing us with those Yanks.
No, you can't. No,
Them are fighting words.
The Yank.
Well, that's why they came up with Mid-Atlantic, because no one wants to claim them.
Mm-hmm.
See, the main difference is at least we started desegregating. They're still segregated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ever been to Baltimore?
Or Boston.
Yeah.
Or New York?
But, so where have I been in the South? Because I think we're going to have to
Okay.
agree to disagree on where the South begins.
Okay, well, let's start at the bottom.
Okay, Florida.
You've been to Florida? What part of Florida were you in?
I've been to Orlando, I've been to Miami, I have been to Tallahassee, I have been to Naples.
Only one of those cities I actually like, and I still don't like.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, you can't, that's...
I mean, Florida's just Florida. It's different.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
Florida.
It's Florida.
I've been to Georgia.
Nice.
I've been to both North Carolina, South Carolina.
Let's go.
I've been to Kentucky and Tennessee. You guys consider that South?
I do.
I have been to Louisiana.
Hey.
I've been to Texas.
Woo!
I have been to, what are the other...
Mississippi, Alabama.
I've driven through Alabama. Haven't really stopped. I have not been to Mississippi.
Yeah.
You're not missing anything between
No,
those two.
but I'm curious.
Mississippi's where it's at, honestly. It's a,
Yeah.
underrated state,
Yeah.
I will say. But yeah, where in Louisiana were you?
New Orleans. My first, typical, but my first ever time to New Orleans was when I was like 8, and my sister was, I was 8, 13, so I was still young, and my parents were cool, my sister was in that stage, and we happened to go in Mardi Gras. And I loved catching all the beads, but my sister was aware of the debauchery that was happening in the presence of her parents, and she was just like,
Mortified.
why are we here right now? So I've only been to New Orleans.
It is very much Sodom and Gomorrah. It is just...
Yeah, I was gonna say like, How old was your sister at the time?
13.
Yeah.
Wait, how old are you?
I was 8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
We're-
I thought it was cool.
Okay, so yeah, I was about to say like,
I collected all the
Well,
beads and the coins.
or at least like with a 13-year-old would be like, why are we here during Mardi Gras?
Yeah.
Or at least question that.
Yeah, and I don't want to be witnessing these things with my parents right now.
Yeah, that's always
and I
not
don't
the best.
quite understand. Yeah.
It's like when you watch an R-rated movie with your parents and like one of those scenes comes up and you're just like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do right now. This feels weird.
Like, yeah. It's
You
like,
didn't see that.
it's good.
Were you able to try at least like Southern cuisine?
Yes. Did you try some of our delicious food?
I mean, I had a really good friend who lived in North Carolina, and there's a biscuit fast food place. What's it called?
Bojangles.
No.
Biscuitville?
Biscuitville.
Yes.
Great Biscuitvilles. Bojangles and I have an awkward relationship because, I don't look back on them fondly because I did a 3-day hike in the Smokies, and my friend decided our last meal before we started the hike was to have Bojangles. And I don't know if you've done a 3-day trek, 18 miles, you're camping, it's backcountry. You don't eat Bojangles before you do that. Let's just
Well,
say
actually,
that.
no, we do that.
Yeah, I mean, you do that and you regret that.
Yeah. But honestly, I think in North Carolina, the main main place you go get food is Cookout.
Cookout.
Is that like someone's cookout or is that a name of a restaurant?
It's a
Name of
restaurant.
So
Yeah.
basically, it's like fast food cheap eats that, if you're sober and go during the day, it's gonna not be terrible, not gonna be the greatest thing because like you're paying $5 for essentially like 2 mains and a big main and a drink.
Yeah. Like their
Like-
sides are mains.
Yeah, like you can
So
get chicken
a-
nuggets as
so
a
like
side.
So like a TGIF Fridays?
Better than that.
Oh yeah, like a way better than that. But yeah, there's also like, but yeah, yeah, the
And Waffle House.
we talked about that in the last
I've
episode.
never been to a Waffle House.
You should go.
See, that you definitely need to. It's definitely an experience. I think we kind of like. I always think of Waffle House because like the hurricane that just happened in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest indicators that it was going to be a huge thing was the Waffle House is closing.
That's a great marker. I unfortunately associate Southern food, unless it's been homemade, with like Cracker Barrel and that stuff. No.
Yeah.
Cracker Barrel is very mid.
But that was like me and my family driving up and down 95 on road trips, and that would be like there and you'd stop.
Oh yeah, no, like if you're.
I hate going down 95
Mm-hmm.
because the second you cross the border from NC to Virginia, you see that Confederate flag.
I mean,
I saw it in Pennsylvania when I was in
you
Pennsylvania.
see it in Virginia. Like the minute you start driving out past, like the outskirts of Fairfax, you start seeing it.
Yeah, honestly, like the crazy thing for me is like even where I'm at, even if you skip the little liberal bubble and you go into Trump country,
Yeah.
you still don't see that many Confederate flags. I came up here, I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
Dude, I told you when like
You're the one saying Nova is not like the South.
it's not the South.
It is.
It is not.
It
Bro,
is.
it is.
It is
Two
not.
people of color are telling you it's Southern because it's racist.
It's also
Are you,
Virginia.
are you saying it's okay? You're calling it Southern because it's racist?
Yes, it has a history of racism.
Okay, but you always have said you're on the record of saying that you consider Virginia part of the South.
It is.
I mean, it technically is.
Yes.
You don't think it is?
I say Richmond down.
Whoa. So that's like me culturally saying Trenton down.
Kinda, but like I
So
consider
basically, now you're salty.
no, not something. I consider Nova like part of the DMV.
I mean, the way
DC.
we
Even
they
then,
vote,
like-
it goes blue most of the time, but Virginia
It
is.
still can go
do not
red.
be fooled.
Oh, it's the
by-
South. They're
Again,
Yeah.
Virginia Beach.
remember the whole
Oh,
whole debate about like CRT basically started in Loudoun County,
That is
Virginia.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Oh yeah, that's where Fairfax is.
Exactly. So again, it was like one of the richest and more like a Democratic controlled like county. Still was the epicenter of like going against like actually teaching about racism in America and actually going about solving like actually having conversations to truly unpack the racial history of this country.
You know what? You know what? I retract my statement. I'm now in agreement with you.
There we go.
Off
There we
topic,
go.
but driving down 95 between North Carolina and South Carolina, what's that thing? Or maybe it's in South Carolina, like south of the border.
Oh my god.
Oh my
Oh,
goodness.
yeah. But I was gonna make
5 miles away,
my.
25 miles away.
Let's get it
Are you
going.
gonna stop? Are you gonna go?
Yeah.
Will you go, Mom? Can I go? No,
That's
I'm not going. And it is the biggest disappointment.
It is, and the thing is, like, the only reason I actually went down there is because, like, from my beach college town down there, it was just a segue of just going to Myrtle Beach.
But I was gonna say, like, with the Confederate flags, like, I was in Western Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago. I told you about this, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, literally, we're driving through this little small town, and there's like a one of those electronic billboards with a Nazi flag on it.
Whoa.
I know, right?
Like, legit?
Yes.
Why?
Like, no message about, like, screw Nazis or no Nazis, love not hate. Like,
No,
that,
it was like,
literally just a.
It was someone's house?
No, it was a
billboard.
billboard in the town. Someone took out this ad.
To put a Nazi flag, and someone approved of it.
Mm-hmm. And it was just like, all right. And I was just like, yeah, Butler County, Pennsylvania. That was.
Yeah, I mean, Confederate flags are.
That's one thing.
Yeah, they're intense. I mean, same level of that. I think I remember my same friend who took me to Bojangles before a 3-day hike got married in Virginia. She lived in the Blacksburg area.
Mhm.
Beautiful in the Blue Ridge Mountains, lovely. But where she got married was in like the countryside. And I remember we were in a party van driving up to the venue, which is her friend's farm. And the car got stuck, and right to the right was a house with a huge Confederate flag. And I looked around in the car, and I was like, okay, so I die first. All right. I was like...
I mean, like, one of the funniest things that, or kind of like, is also very much cringy anytime you go, is like when you go to like a white person's wedding and they decide to have the wedding at a plantation venue.
Yeah, that's.
Experience that.
I unfortunately like, and I've done like. Did you guys have cotillion? Yeah, the plantation ball, dead balls. It's just like, it's disgusting. It honestly, like, I know it's like cultural. It's cultural, like, in a weird way. But for me, it's like I just find myself like, even then, even when I was younger, I was like, this is gross.
Yeah.
A girl I was dating in high school who broke my heart. Shocker, right? She went to cotillion without me, and I was like,
Yeah, but these kinds of things know no borders, right? So
Yeah.
I grew up in Connecticut and experienced very similar, not cotillions, but like when you thought your neighbor liked you, but you're like, oh, they don't really. It's they like you, but they don't like what you represent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's also just like,
oh,
I was about to say, like, you probably also experience this too, especially within like different immigrant communities, colorism in that
for
that
sure.
aspect. Like, for me, my skin complexion is like the fairest of my family, and even for my own mother, like getting disgusted. When I got a tan.
I love getting tan, and my mother still will be like, I prefer you not tan. I'm like, oh, I love you no matter what, Ma.
Yep.
Yeah, no, colorism's real within your own community, but I think there's more conversations about that, and
Yeah.
there's more ways people embracing it. And
Yeah, and also like, especially, or at least from my perspective, in my family, like, especially in a lot of the Southeast Asian cultures, like the caste system is still ingrained,
Oh, for sure.
and it's just like it. In a sense, it's very disgusting in how like it operates,
Yeah.
and I just see it as like you kind of like already assimilated or accepted this idea of everyone's equal, and coming over here, you kind of also have to put that aside. But yet, there's always like constant competitions within immigrant communities of you got to be better than this person.
Well, yeah, and even talking about race and racism within my community with my aunties and uncles, there's a lot of anti-Black racism within the community. There's a lot of anti-Muslim racism within the community, and so those conversations are happening, but they're still very difficult. And there's a long history of that within our community, and so I think that's where I focus on my own day-to-day conversations of non-selectivism.
yeah, and it's kind of like what you talked about earlier with like the trying. How do we not make this like a top-down approach?
Yeah.
Because how do we take the? So we like, and I think that our organization, to your credit, as an administrator, does a really to everyone's credit,
Yeah.
does a good job of like going like kind of bottom up.
Yeah.
So.
I'm glad to hear that.
Well, I think we're getting close to
Yeah.
running out of time, aren't we?
Well, we are.
Thanks everyone for listening. Remember to like the videos on YouTube. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
And a big shout out to
the Banana
Pudding for coming on to
Thanks
this
for
episode.
having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
It was great talking to you guys.
Yeah, y'all be
It was-
good.
It was a pleasure having you on your show. Y'all be good.
Y'all be good.
Yeah, here.
Yeah, here.